Before Judd Apatow grossed $3 billion at the box office, before Seth Rogen became America's favorite curly-haired stoner, and before James Franco quote-unquote hosted the Oscars, they were all on one show. Freaks and Geeks was a critical darling, and a quarter century later, it's still hailed as one of the most realistic high school shows of all time. So why was it stuffed in the proverbial locker by its own network? It lasted just one drama-filled season, full of creative battles, network interference, and a bitter ending that led to a producer's quest for revenge that ended up shaping Hollywood for the next 25 years. This is the rise, the rapid collapse, and the insane legacy of Freaks and Geeks. Now, before we start, give this video a like if you watched Freaks and Geeks back in the day, and subscribe for more retro TV deep dives. Okay, so let's go all the way back to 1999 and a writer named Paul Feig. At that point, he'd done some minor acting work like playing a camp counselor in Ben Stiller's Heavyweights and a recurring role as Mr. Poole on Sabrina the Teenage Witch, but not much else. 10 years after moving to California, he had hit the lowest point in his life. So, needing some inspiration, he dug into the archives, so to speak. He started writing about his high school experience, and no, he wasn't writing about the quarterback or the prom queen. This was about the unpopular kids on the fringes who nobody paid attention to. The setting was a fictional town of Chippewa, Michigan, named after Chippewa Valley High School, the school Feig attended as a teen, just outside of Detroit. He didn't think he was sitting on a gold mine exactly, but his wife insisted that he send it to an old friend. That old friend was Judd Apatow. Now, in 1999, this wasn't knocked up and 40-year-old virgin Apatow. He was a younger producer who had cut his teeth on the Ben Stiller Show and the Larry Sanders Show, but he was looking for his own vehicle to produce. So when Feig's script landed on his desk, he called him back within 12 hours saying, "I love this, I'm going to have DreamWorks buy it," which they did. DreamWorks shopped it to all the major networks on the same day, and they all passed, to the point where things were looking kind of bleak. But one development executive named Shelley McCrory over at NBC read the pilot and reportedly told her boss, "If we don't make this show, I'm quitting the television business." And with that, NBC president Scott Sassa gave it the green light. He told Feig and Apatow they could cast real kids, not TV stars, and he told them not to change a thing. A network and creators on the same page. Now, obviously that utopia was not going to last, and I'll get to that in a minute. But at the time, Feig and Apatow had the green light to get real people for their main cast, and that made for a unique casting process. Legendary casting director Allison Jones later described it as inventing while casting. So basically, characters were being rewritten in real time to match whoever walked through the door. The first major find was Linda Cardellini, who was cast as Lindsay Weir, the show's lead, a straight-A student and star mathlete who quietly starts falling apart after her grandmother's death. Cardellini was 23 years old at the time, and to that point had done minor roles on Boy Meets World and Third Rock from the Sun. Fun fact, Feig said Lindsay was the only main character not based on a real person. She was entirely made up. Which brings us to John Francis Daley, just 14 years old at the time, who got the role of Lindsay's younger brother Sam. He was the character most directly based on Feig himself. Daley had toured internationally with the Broadway musical Tommy, which was the last thing you would expect given that Sam was anything but bright lights and razzle-dazzle. Apparently Daley auditioned while sick with a fever, and later said that probably helped him because he was too tired and seemed defeated. For Sam's two best friends, they cast Sam Levine as Neil and Martin Starr as Bill Haverchuck. Levine earned the role by doing a William Shatner impression in the middle of his audition without asking permission, which Apatow loved because, as he put it, that's all of us in school just trying to be funny, doing stupid stuff. Starr, meanwhile, walked into his audition mostly thinking about what he was going to eat afterward. His signature blank, monotone way about him became the soul of the character and pretty much every character he's played since. Those were the geeks, now come the freaks. James Franco, who was 20 at the time, played Daniel Desario, the charismatic bad boy who'd been held back twice. In Franco fashion, before the audition, he drove to Michigan, found Feig's real high school, tracked down one of the teachers there, and spent time on campus until he spotted a rough-looking student he decided to channel. Turned out to be a good move. Jason Segel, who was 19, played Nick Andopoulos, the big-hearted stoner drummer who is hopelessly in love with Lindsay. Seth Rogen was cast as Ken Miller, the sarcastic kid with nothing to prove. He was discovered on a casting trip to Vancouver at just 16 years old. This would be his first time on television. And Busy Phillips rounded out the Freaks as Kim Kelly, Daniel's girlfriend, and Lindsay's initial antagonist. Fun fact, Phillips had been doing the toy fair circuit portraying a real-life Barbie doll and almost didn't take the role because her agent didn't think a supporting part on an unproven show was worth it. Linda Cardellini apparently talked her into it. Good thing she did. Freaks and Geeks premiered on September 25, 1999, and NBC couldn't have put it in a worse spot, Saturday at 8 p.m. That time slot was basically the land of misfit toys, the place shows went when the network wasn't sure what to do with them. But the pilot actually performed respectably. 9.17 million viewers tuned in, and critics loved it. Across the board, reviewers called it the most honest portrayal of high school that had ever aired on network television. This was far from Dawson's Creek and nowhere near the Beverly Hills 90210 zip code. This was reality. Speaking of reality, it hit hard after episode 2, when the ratings plummeted to 5.58 million viewers. And with that, Freaks and Geeks got suspended. NBC put the show on a 4-week hiatus for the World Series. Now, this is pretty much a death blow for a new show. 2 episodes, then poof, you're gone. And what was going on behind the scenes between the show and NBC wasn't helping. Garth Ancier had replaced Scott Sassa as NBC Entertainment President earlier in that year and took over day-to-day creative control of the schedule and series development. Remember, Sassa was the show's champion, the guy who said not to change a thing. Garth Ancier, however, came from the WB, home of Dawson's Creek and Seventh Heaven, the kind of polished teen dramas that Freaks and Geeks was a direct rejection of. And apparently, he just didn't get the show because he didn't come from that world. So early on, Feig and Apatow started getting notes from the network. The kids lost too often. They needed to win more. He wanted cooler characters, someone more like the shows he had on the WB. Heck, the network suggested they have Britney Spears appear as a waitress in one episode. Feig and Apatow pushed back naturally because the entire point was to show how kids handle failure and difficult experiences. The moment the characters started winning more and looked cooler, Freaks and Geeks didn't make that much sense. So yeah, after 2 episodes, the show was already on thin ice, and that ice was about to melt fast. The show came back in November, aired 3 more episodes, but ratings stayed flat, around 5 to 6 million viewers per week. And to be fair, there was no network support. The producers actually built a website so fans could track the air dates because the show was moving around, and NBC refused to share the URL in any of their advertising because, in Apatow's words, they didn't want people to know the internet existed. They were worried about losing viewers to it. How very Blockbuster of them. Anyway, NBC once again put the show on hiatus, this time for 2 months. And when they brought it back in January 2000, they moved it from Saturdays to Mondays at 8 p.m. Now on the surface, that sounds like an upgrade. But it was not, because Monday at 8 p.m. in January 2000 meant competing directly with Regis Philbin and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, which was the most watched show on television. Basically, it was the AV Club trying to fight the varsity football team in the hallway. They weren't exactly set up to succeed. And yet the show's numbers actually ticked up. It peaked at 8.22 million viewers in late January, the best it had done outside of its premiere. But then viewership dropped back down, and at this point, everyone was kind of feeling like the end was near. Jason Segel said you could tell by watching the craft service table. It started with cold cuts and a full spread, but by the end, it was down to a half a container of dairy creamer and some mini corn pops. And because they felt the axe hanging over their heads, Apatow and Feig decided to write and shoot the series finale, called Discos and Dragons, in the middle of the run to make sure there was a clean ending in case the network pulled the plug, which they did on March 19th, 2000. Now, even though everyone felt this was coming, it gutted everyone involved. Linda Cardellini, for example, found out while riding in a limousine to tape her first appearance on The Late Show with David Letterman, which was happening because someone at that show loved Freaks and Geeks and knew the show was in trouble and wanted to support it. Her publicist called while she was en route, and Letterman addressed the cancellation in their interview, and that's when it really hit her. Talk about a surreal moment. Apatow had to call Paul Feig to let him know, while Feig was, get this, grieving his mother's death, which happened just 2 days earlier. And to make things worse, the show had only run 12 of its 18 episodes, and there was no guarantee the final 6 would see the light of day. But while the viewership was relatively small by NBC standards, the fans were passionate, and they would eventually save the show with what was dubbed Operation Haverchuck, named after the character Bill Haverchuck. So this was an online fan movement focused on getting another network to pick up the show. Fans pooled $3,746 online to buy a full-page open letter in Daily Variety, urging network executives to pick up the show, which in the early days of the internet before GoFundMe, that was a big deal. And then they bombarded television executives by mailing them packages of peanuts, a reference to a storyline where Bill suffers a severe allergic reaction. Now, they weren't able to get a second season as they hoped, but the pressure was enough to get NBC to air 3 of the final episodes in July, including the finale that they shot mid-season. And then Fox Family Channel aired the remaining 3 episodes a few months later. Perhaps the person who took all of this the worst was Judd Apatow. The guy was so distraught in the months after the cancellation that he herniated a disc in his back, which required surgery, and put him on painkillers for 6 months. This man wanted revenge. He made it his personal mission to get everyone from that show into his productions, starting with the short-lived show Undeclared, which starred or guest starred a lot of the Freaks and Geeks cast. In a 2014 interview, he described everything he'd done since the cancellation as revenge for the people who canceled Freaks and Geeks. And revenge he got because the careers the show spawned are insane. Seth Rogen became a comedy superstar. Superbad, Knocked Up, Pineapple Express, This Is the End. He's an Emmy-winning executive producer on The Boys, one of Amazon's most watched series, and not surprisingly, he's also built an entire cannabis lifestyle brand on the side. Jason Segel played Marshall on How I Met Your Mother for 9 seasons. He wrote and starred in Forgetting Sarah Marshall, which was based, in part at least, on his real-life relationship with Freaks and Geeks co-star Linda Cardellini. More recently, he co-created and stars in Shrinking on Apple TV, which earned him his first Emmy and Golden Globe nominations as an actor. Linda Cardellini spent 6 seasons on ER, earned an Emmy nomination for Mad Men, and built a second career in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as Hawkeye's wife, and earned another Emmy nomination in 2020 for Dead to Me. John Francis Daley co-wrote Spider-Man Homecoming and co-wrote and directed Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. The kid who played the geekiest geek on a show about geeks ended up writing one of the biggest superhero movies of the last decade. Martin Starr played Guilfoyle on one of my favorite shows, Silicon Valley, for 6 seasons, appeared in multiple Spider-Man films as Mr. Harrington, and remains one of the most recognizable character actors working today. Busy Phillips went on to Dawson's Creek, then Cougar Town, then hosted her own late-night show on E! Busy Tonight. Speaking of busy, Sam Levine has been acting in several films and TV shows, including Inglourious Basterds, and guest spots on major series like How I Met Your Mother, Modern Family, and Lost. As for James Franco, he won a Golden Globe in 2001 for his portrayal of James Dean and earned international stardom through the Spider-Man trilogy and 127 Hours, which earned him an Oscar nomination. Paul Feig directed Bridesmaids in 2011, earning 2 Academy Award nominations. Then he did The Heat, Spy, and most recently The Housemaid. Today, Freaks and Geeks lives on Paramount+, Prime Video, and other streaming services, and now a whole new generation is falling in love with it, and for good reason. It's arguably the best show canceled within its first season. Time put it on their list of the 100 greatest shows of all time. Rolling Stone ranked it the 11th greatest television series ever made. TV Guide named it the #1 show canceled too soon. And really, it was ahead of its time. The shows Feig was writing against, Dawson's Creek, Beverly Hills 90210, the whole genre of aspirational teen drama, it largely faded out. Whereas Freaks and Geeks was a pioneer in authentic, cringe-inducing teenage awkwardness. Creators have cited it as inspiration many times. Veronica Mars creator Rob Thomas said, "When I wrote the Veronica Mars pilot, it was sort of a response to the cancellation to Freaks and Geeks, and the Duffer Brothers have explicitly named Freaks and Geeks as a key influence on Stranger Things." And Sam Levine put it cleanly in a 25th anniversary interview. Freaks and Geeks walked so Stranger Things could run. When you add it all up, it's hard to find a show that impacted entertainment more than Freaks and Geeks. Not bad for a show that only lasted 1 season. If you enjoyed this deep dive, give the video a like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.